When night falls, the darkness starts to speak. Between each breath and the silence there are whispers no one was meant to hear. This is Night Whispers, where the dark has a story to tell. When I was about 9, life seemed simple: a quiet street, summer days filled with laughter, and a small old house that creaked with every breeze. My mom said it was just an old place settling, but sometimes when night fell and the air turned still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was more than old, that it was alive, watching us, waiting for something we couldn't see. Old houses creak and sigh, but the sounds I heard that night were different, deliberate, almost breathing. I remember lying there, my blanket tight under my chin, watching the glow-in-the-dark stars fade into the shadows. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if someone else was there with me, just beyond the edge of sight. Then in the corner by my toy chest, a shadow moved where nothing should have moved. My little room always felt safe, filled with toys and the soft glow from the window. That night, the shadows of tree branches danced gently on the wall, and I tried to believe that was all I saw. But one shadow stayed still, low, thick, and dark near my toy chest. The others swayed, but that one watched. The longer I stared, the clearer it became that something there was not a trick of the wind. At first I tried to laugh it off, maybe it was just my teddy bear or a pile of clothes waiting to be folded. But when I blinked, the shadow vanished, leaving only the quiet hum of the night. A chill crept through me, not from the wind or the room, but from somewhere deeper. It was the kind of cold that felt aware, like something unseen had just slipped away before I could truly see it. The next morning I almost forgot the whole thing until I saw my toy chest wide open, toys scattered as if someone had searched through them. I shut it quietly and told no one. Weeks passed before my little sister, only 5, looked up at Mom and said she didn't like the man in the closet. The words froze me. She said it so casually, as if that man had always been there, waiting behind the door. Her words sent a shiver down my spine. She spoke so calmly, like it was normal to have a man standing in her closet at night. Mom just smiled and said, "Kids imagine things," but I saw the fear behind my sister's eyes. She wasn't pretending. She said, he whispered to her, soft and steady, but she could never understand the words, as if the darkness itself was trying to speak through him. That night, Mom tucked my sister in, whispered a short prayer, and left the light on, but she never opened the closet door. Hours later, I woke to a slow scraping sound like nails dragging across the wooden floor. It moved closer with every breath until it stopped right beside my bed. My body stiffened. I didn't dare look. Some part of me knew that if I did, something would be waiting, looking straight back. I stayed frozen, gripping the blanket until exhaustion pulled me back to sleep. When morning came, sunlight revealed deep scratches etched into the floor beside my bed, long, jagged lines that hadn't been there before. My heart pounded as I called for Mom, but instead of fear, her face twisted in anger. She said I must have done it myself, maybe with a toy or chair. I tried to explain, but the words caught in my throat. I promised her I hadn't done it, but she only sighed and walked away. After that, the nights turned heavier. I started hearing whispers, soft crackling sounds like a distant radio murmuring in the dark. They always came from the closet. Sometimes my sister would wake up crying, her finger trembling as she pointed toward the corner. "He's there," she'd whisper again and again, eyes wide with a fear that felt far too real for a child. I never saw him myself, but I believed every word she said. That uneasy feeling, the weight of unseen eyes, lingered in the air. Sometimes the silence was so thick it hummed. One freezing night in the middle of winter, I woke to find my bedroom door wide open. I always closed it before bed. Through the gap, the hallway light glowed faintly, the only warmth in a house that suddenly felt colder than ever. As I stared, the hallway light flickered once, then died completely. I held my breath, convincing myself the bulb had burned out. But then came the footsteps, slow, deliberate, each one pressing closer until they stopped right outside my door. My throat tightened. No sound would come out. The door creaked open, and a tall, shadowy figure leaned in its head, tilting toward me. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed it wouldn't move closer. When I finally opened my eyes, the door was shut, and the room was empty as if nothing had happened. Morning light brought little comfort. I asked Mom if she'd come in during the night, but she shook her head half asleep and confused. My sister, pale and trembling, whispered that the man had been standing by her bed again. This time, Mom didn't argue. She lit a candle and moved through each room, whispering a prayer into the quiet. For a while, the house felt peaceful, almost normal, until one afternoon. I got home before Mom dropped my bag and started my homework on the couch. Then came a loud slam from down the hall, the unmistakable sound of my toy chest closing hard. My heart stopped. No one else was home. I told myself it was the wind, but as I crept toward my room, the door stood wide open, swaying slightly as if someone had just walked through. Inside, the toy chest was shut tight, yet every toy lay scattered across the floor as if someone had tossed them out in a hurry. My stomach turned cold. I backed out of the room and waited on the porch until Mom came home. When I told her what happened, she just sighed and blamed the cat. I let it go, but years later, after we'd moved, I finally asked if she had ever felt anything strange in that house. She paused for a long moment before answering. Then, softly, she said yes. Sometimes she'd wake in the middle of the night and see a shadow standing in her doorway, tall, silent, and still. She never told us because she didn't want to frighten us, but she admitted she always felt something was wrong with that house. Her voice trembled as she whispered that she thought it was a man, someone who had once lived there but never truly left. Mom never spoke of it again, but I'll never forget. My sister and I both saw him. We both felt him. Even now as an adult, the memory twists in my chest like ice. It wasn't a dream or a child's fear. It was real. And sometimes when the night grows too quiet, I still hear the faint scrape of nails across the floor. When I was 10, life was supposed to start fresh, a new stepdad, a bigger house, and a quiet street lined with tall trees. The place smelled of fresh paint and sunlight, a promise of safety and peace. For a while, I believed it. But comfort has a way of fading. It began with small things, barely noticeable at first, the kind that whisper, not shout, that something in the house isn't quite right. My room sat quietly at the end of the hall, bright during the day, but strangely heavy at night. 2 wide windows looked out to the backyard, and a deep closet stood against the far wall, swallowing light. I loved it at first until that first night. Around midnight, I woke to a faint sound inside the closet, soft, steady, like fabric brushing against skin. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, and it didn't stop. I stared at the closet, forcing myself to believe it was nothing, just the house, breathing, the wood adjusting to the night. That's what I told myself anyway. Old houses make noise. Everyone says that. But then the door trembled, not a gust, not a creak, but a subtle push like a hand pressing gently from the other side. My breath caught. The air seemed to hold its own breath too, waiting for something to happen. I wanted to run to my mom's room, but my body refused to move. I just lay there, eyes locked on the closet until exhaustion pulled me back to sleep. When morning came, the door stood slightly open though. I remembered closing it tight. Mom said it must have been the air vents, but the air couldn't make a door breathe. After that night, things grew worse. The house felt awake, and every shadow seemed to hold its own secret. Soon a new sound joined the nights, a faint tapping on the window pane. At first I convinced myself it was just a branch, brushing in the wind, but when I looked there were no trees close enough to touch the glass. The tapping would continue for minutes, steady and patient, stopping only when I hid under the blanket. One night curiosity won over fear, and I slowly peeked out, praying I wouldn't regret it. What I saw froze the breath in my chest, a pale hand pressed flat against the glass from the outside. My room was on the 2nd floor. No one could have reached that high without a ladder. Yet the hand stayed there motionless, as if it were listening. Minutes passed before it slowly slid downward, leaving a faint trail against the fogged glass. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak sounded like fingers returning. The next morning I told Mom everything. She burst out laughing, thinking I was joking, but her smile faded when she saw my face. Then she switched tones, saying I'd probably been half asleep, that dreams can feel real sometimes. I wanted to believe her, but deep down I knew better. I hadn't dreamed that pale hand. I'd seen it clear as day, pressed against the glass, waiting for me to notice. My stepdad didn't believe me either. He joked that I was making up ghost stories for attention, laughing it off like it was nothing. But after that I noticed he always left the hallway light on every single night. Maybe he wasn't as fearless as he wanted us to think. Then about a month later, my little brother started talking about the White Lady. He said it so simply, like she was someone we should already know. He said the White Lady came into his room at night and sat on his bed. Mom just smiled and said he had a vivid imagination until the night his scream shattered the house. I ran in and found him trembling under the blanket, tears streaming down his face. When he finally spoke, his voice shook. He said she'd been standing by the door, just watching him, her eyes completely black like two holes cut into her face. I believed him instantly. How could I not, after what I'd seen at my window? Every night after that, I slept with the blanket pulled over my head as if thin fabric could protect me. But it didn't stop the dreams. She came for me too, the white lady standing in the corner of my room, her face hidden in shadow. She would whisper my name, her voice dry and brittle like dead leaves brushing across the floor. Sometimes I woke to her voice, still whispering faint, but real, too real to be a dream. Then, one night I opened my eyes and saw her. She stood at the foot of my bed, impossibly tall, her head nearly touching the ceiling. A long, white dress draped over her body, shifting even though the air was still. Her hair hung in thin black strands, and her face pale, as chalk looked almost human but not quite. Her eyes were hollow, two black voids that swallowed the light. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only air. I squeezed my eyes shut, trembling, and when I dared to open them again, she was gone. Only the closet door gaped wide, dark, and waiting. After that, I couldn't step near it. I begged Mom to let me sleep in her room, but she refused. Maybe it wasn't about teaching me courage, maybe she was afraid too. The worst night came with a storm, rain hammering the roof, wind howling like it wanted in. I woke to the sound of my window creaking a slow, deliberate groan. The lock twisted on its own, clicking open. My heart stopped as the window slid upward by itself. Through the flashing lightning, I saw her, the white lady, gliding inside. She didn't walk. She floated, her dress rippling as if underwater, her face pale and cold as moonlight. Her feet never touched the ground. She glided soundlessly across the room, the air freezing in her wake. I couldn't move. She leaned over my bed until her face hovered inches from mine. Her breath brushed my skin, icy and real. Then she whispered my name again, soft but sharp, and I screamed. Mom and my stepdad burst in, switching on the light, but the window was shut tight, locked, and the room was empty once more. They shouted at me for waking the house, but I saw the fear flicker in their eyes. They didn't want to admit it, but they were shaken too. The strangest thing is I can't clearly remember those few seconds before I screamed, just a blur like my mind had gone dark. It was as if something had pressed pause on me, and when I came back I was already screaming while my parents burst through the door. By morning the window was closed again, locked as if it had never moved. Everyone said it must have been a night terror, that I'd only dreamed it. My parents clung to that explanation though. Mom quietly took me to therapy afterward. She never said it, but I knew she was scared too. We stayed in that house for 3 more years, and no matter how hard I tried, I never stopped feeling watched. My brother eventually stopped mentioning the white lady, but I don't think she stopped coming. He was just too scared to talk about her, afraid Mom would send him to therapy too. Some nights I'd hear him crying through the walls, whispering, "Go away." I never dared to check. Even now, when storms rattle the windows, I still hesitate to get up for water. The sound of rain always feels like she might be listening. Even now, I still catch myself glancing at the corners of my room just to be sure nothing tall and silent is standing there. It's strange how fear can grow up with you, how it settles quietly inside the mind. People say it was only night terrors, and maybe they're right, but I can't forget that pale hand on my window, the one I saw long before my brother ever spoke of the white lady. I guess some things simply defy explanation. You grow up, move on, and pretend it never happened, but part of you still listens for that whisper in the dark. Maybe it was a dream, maybe not. All I know is once you've seen something like that, no amount of light ever truly feels safe again. When I was 8, my world was small but full of adventure. Just my red bike, the long afternoons, and a quiet street lined with old trees. I knew every bump in the road, every mailbox, every corner where the sunlight hit just right. But there was one house at the end of the block that always caught my eye. It looked ordinary, yet something about it made me slow down every time I passed. To see the house properly, I had to ride all the way to the corner where the street curved. It had a long driveway, the kind that glowed golden in the afternoon sun, and a wide, neatly cut lawn. Almost every day an old man stood there, always in the same spot, always wearing the same hat. He'd watch the street quietly until he saw me, then raise his hand with a warm smile and say, "Hi there." He never left his driveway, not even by a step. He'd just stand there smiling, waving, and calling out from a distance before turning back to his yard. I always waved back. It became our quiet little routine. Mom had warned me never to cross the street alone, so I never did. The man seemed to understand that rule. From his place across the road, he'd call out questions about school, his voice calm and friendly. He often asked about my bike, saying how shiny it looked in the sun, and once he asked if I liked the bell on my new red one. I still remember him telling a silly joke about a cat that made me laugh so hard I nearly fell off. For weeks we spoke like that, short talks across the street. Yet somehow he always seemed to know little details about me, things I never actually told him. He somehow knew things he shouldn't, that I had a little brother, that Dad had just bought a new car. I never told him any of that. I figured maybe he'd just seen us from afar like any curious neighbor. Then one afternoon I got my brand new red bike with its shiny silver bell. I rode slowly down the block to show it off, and there he was, waving from his driveway, calling out with a grin, "Nice bike." He laughed and asked if I wanted to race him to the corner, but I shook my head. Mom would never allow it. One day, he said with a grin. After that, our talks turned lighter. He told me about a bird that always perched on his fence and a strange rule about never stepping on one particular stone in his yard. Then he shared a story about a loyal dog that kept returning a slipper no one had lost. He spoke like someone who noticed the little things most people overlooked, the quiet kind of man who watched life happen one detail at a time. After that, I started looking for him whenever I rode my bike. Some days he'd wave, some days the driveway was empty, then one week he simply stopped appearing. When I passed by, no one stood there anymore, and the curtains in the front window were drawn tight. I slowed my bike as I passed, staring at the empty driveway. It felt strange, wrong, almost not seeing him there. I wanted to ask Mom if I could cross the street and check, but she immediately said no. The road isn't safe without an adult, she reminded me. A few days later, while riding past again, I saw a woman in the backyard. It startled me. I'd never seen anyone back there before. I pedaled around the corner to get a better look. The woman had her hair tied back and held a watering can, so I figured she must have been tending to flowers. I stopped my bike a little down the street, keeping far enough that she wouldn't notice me staring. Part of me wanted to call out like I always did with the old man, but this time I couldn't bring myself to speak. Something about it felt different. Maybe I was just too shy, or maybe I was afraid Mom would catch me out too late and scold me. The woman didn't seem to notice me at all. She moved calmly, lost in her own world. A few days later, I rode past again and saw her sitting on the back porch holding a mug steam rising into the cool air. I stopped at the curb, straddling my bike, and watched quietly for a moment. She opened a small side door and disappeared around the house. My heart raced. I pedaled slowly to the corner and waited, glancing down the block to make sure Mom wasn't outside. Then, before I could change my mind, I pushed hard on the pedals and dashed across the street as if my life depended on it. Up close, the house felt different, taller, older, and somehow heavier, like it was watching me arrive. The driveway dipped gently toward the road, stretching longer than it looked from across the street. As I coasted down, a strange guilt crept over me, like I was trespassing somewhere I shouldn't be. I stopped near the back gate, gripping my handlebars. The woman turned at the sound of my tires. She spotted me, a small boy with a red bike, and though her face showed surprise, there was no anger. She opened the gate and asked softly, "What are you doing back here?" I told her about the man who used to stand in the driveway, how he'd wave and say hi whenever I rode past, how he somehow knew my name and once promised we'd race someday. She listened, quietly wiping her hands on her dress, leaving faint marks of soil. After a moment, she said softly that the man I was describing sounded exactly like her husband. My heart skipped. Something in her voice told me this wasn't a simple coincidence. I smiled, expecting her to laugh and tell me he was inside or away on a trip, but her face stayed still. Then she said softly that her husband Harold had died the year before, in his chair, right there in the house. The world seemed to go silent. A cold, hollow feeling spread through my chest. I hesitated, then asked if she had a picture of him. Without a word, she went inside and returned holding a small framed photo. In the photograph, a man smiled beneath the same kind of hat with the same warm expression I remembered. My heart sank. It really did look like him. The woman said the picture was recent, taken only a few years before he passed. Then she mentioned her husband had a scar along his cheek since youth. I leaned closer. There, it was a faint, pale line stretching from ear to mouth, one I'd never seen on the man I'd met. I thought back to the man on the driveway, his face clear and smooth, not a single mark on his skin. The hat was the same, the smile too, but the scar didn't belong. I told her that once I thought I'd seen him touch his cheek, maybe rubbing at something, but I hadn't noticed a scar. She nodded and said her husband's scar had been there his whole life, though he often hid it beneath a bit of stubble. She repeated gently that her husband had passed and that no one else lived in the house. She'd only moved back the previous summer to tend the garden, and in all that time she'd never seen or heard anyone in the driveway. A chill crept over me, then the kind that makes your stomach twist. I mumbled a thank you and stepped back, my bike rolling with me. I didn't dare look toward the yard again. I rode home slowly, the world around me oddly quiet. It felt like that silence after nearly getting into a car crash, the kind where you turn off the radio and just breathe. When I got home, Mom didn't ask where I'd been. She only told me to be careful next time. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the man with the hat and the way he used to smile. I kept hearing his laugh in my head, the friendly way he'd say my name, and that scar from the photograph I couldn't stop picturing. The next day, I rode past the house again. The curtains were open this time, sunlight spilling across the porch and driveway. Everything looked warm and alive, yet empty. I slowed at the corner, raised my hand, and waved. No one waved back. After a moment, I pedaled away, heart sinking quietly. For a while, life went back to normal. I avoided that street, found new routes for my bike, made friends in other blocks. Weeks passed, and the memory began to fade until one night. I woke to the sound of my name being called soft and careful from just outside my window. The voice was familiar, too familiar. It said my name the same way he used to, stretching it slightly gentle and patient, like an old friend returning. I sat up so fast the room spun around me. Rain tapped softly against the glass, but beneath it I could still hear my name whispered over and over, clear as day. My heart pounded as I screamed for Mom, then dove under the covers. She rushed in and sat beside me, rubbing my back until I stopped shaking. When I told her about the voice outside, she smiled weakly and said it was only the wind. To calm me down, Mom walked to the window and pulled up the blinds. "See," she said softly, "no one's out there." I hesitated, then crept over beside her. Outside, the rain shimmered under the streetlight, empty, silent, ordinary. Mom was right. Dad got up too, checking every lock on the windows and doors before shining his flashlight into the yard. The beam cut through the rain steady and bright, and for a moment, I almost believed I was safe. They assured me no one was outside, their voices calm but tired. When I kept insisting I'd heard someone, they gave the answer every frightened kid eventually hears, that it was just a dream. By morning, my throat ached from all the screaming. At school, I told my friends what happened, hoping for understanding, but they only laughed. "You really believe in ghosts?" one of them teased. I laughed along, but inside I wasn't so sure anymore. One of my friends dared me to stand in the driveway at night and call the man's name. I laughed it off, but deep down I knew I'd never do it. Days turned into weeks, and nothing else happened, so life moved on. Years later, the neighborhood changed, new faces, new cars, old houses sold. The woman's house eventually went dark and empty. I once rode by and saw movers carrying boxes out, their voices echoing in the quiet street. Later, new owners moved in. I saw them repainting the front of the house, laughter echoing down the street. The long driveway was still there, now lined with shiny cars, but I never looked for the man in the hat again. Time passed, I grew up, found new routes, learned the neighbors' names and their dogs. By 18, I'd left for college, and while I was gone, my parents sold our house. I never went back. Still, the memory of that man never left me. It rests in my chest like a small, heavy stone. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't ask the woman for more photos or go back to hear the truth from her own lips. Maybe I was afraid to know, afraid to confirm that I'd spoken to a ghost. I avoided that street for years. When I told the story later, people asked why I hadn't gone back, but I never had an answer. Maybe they were right, maybe I should have been braver, asked more about the scar, or seen a wedding photo. But I was only 8. Courage and curiosity don't always come together at that age. Years later, I drove down that same block again just out of nostalgia. A child was riding a bike near the corner, carefree and laughing. The driveway, once alive with a wave and a smile, now stood empty and still. For a brief moment, I almost stopped the car. I wanted to ask that child if anyone ever stood there waving hello, or if they'd ever heard a voice in the rain. I just needed a small answer to make sense of it all, but I didn't stop. I kept driving. The memory remains untouched, a quiet ghost I've learned to live with. Thank you for staying until the end. If the dark didn't scare you away, maybe you belong here. Subscribe to Night Whispers and let the darkness find you again next time.